All right, well, good afternoon and thanks. In my wife's culture, this is still barely siesta time, so I hope you'll resist the temptation, having had a lot of talk and I hope a good lunch. I'd like to send out some peaceful bullets because I don't know any other way to deal with 20 minutes and all that I'd like to share with you. So I will throw out any number of things which we can take up later on, and that may be touched upon in Danielle and Charles's comments, I'm not sure. But I just kind of want to lay them out, and basically in three sections of these 20 minutes. First of all, a little bit about the scope of the justice and peacebuilding work in CRS. Then a little bit of reference to some examples. La Arroya in Peru, which you had a chance to read in the Extractives and Equity publication, and then a little bit about our work in the two Sudans, and then finally say something about our experience with universities in connection with our justice and peacebuilding work to date, and what I think are some of the possibilities for collaboration in that arena. So let me begin by saying CRS is about 70 years old, but the justice and peacebuilding work within CRS is only about 15 years old. It took a genocide, really, to create an examination of conscience, I think, within CRS, where it began to say, where is peacebuilding and justice in our relief and development work? About 20 or 25% of the world's population today is in a fragile or conflict-affected area. And about half of the countries where CRS is working have been affected by violent conflict in the last 10 years. Violent conflict has been described as development in reverse. The destruction is sometimes unbelievable. I want to say a little bit about how, from CRS, we approach peacebuilding and justice work as my first set of bullets, which I will send your way. First of all, we take conflict as a given, as a normal part of human existence, and sometimes as a necessary prelude to progress. But what we try and do is make sure that conflict does not become violent, or if it does, to mitigate the worst of its effects. So when we talk about peacebuilding work in CRS, we talk about work that may be prevention before violence has broken out. It may be mitigating the worst of the effects when violence does break out, and it may include reintegration of populations, rebuilding, reestablishing of relationships after violence has ended. Our strength, I would say, is really at the grassroots level. The people-to-people kind of initiative that you saw in the Amani Mashinani video, if you had a chance to look at that, I think that's really our strongest niche. But we also work at the highest levels of government in many cases, doing advocacy around peace and justice issues. So within what every peace builder has emblazoned in their brain, I think, of John Paul Lederach's pyramid, we work at the base, the grassroots, but also at the top, and basically from what's called sometimes the middle out. We have three basic pillars in our strategy for peace building, and those are equity, or fairness, based on the notion that, as Pope Paul VI used to put it, if you want peace, work for justice. Social cohesion, in the sense of glue, a sense of unity, a sense of solidarity that holds societies together both horizontally across identity groups, regions, ethnicities, and vertically between those who govern and those who are governed. And more responsive church action. We consider peace building a vocation, a call, and we seek to work with church partners so that the church may respond more effectively to peace and justice. A couple of years ago, we decided on 5 particular subsectors that would help us focus our work. Those are youth, gender, including sexual and gender-based violence, civic engagement and citizen participation, interfaith work, and extractives, natural resource governance issues. We also include within our justice and peacebuilding work human rights and trafficking. So there's a very wide circle of action involved. Not unusual in the peacebuilding field, but still a very wide and diverse arena of action. So the last time we attempted to count, there were about 125 CRS peacebuilding projects being carried out in about 45 countries. An area that I think we've been particularly strong in, as I mentioned, is people-to-people peacebuilding. We've won about 10 roughly $1 million projects from USAID in this field, from Timor-Leste through Peru to Zimbabwe and parts of the Middle East. Many of our projects are standalone in the sense that the focus is on a justice and peacebuilding issue, but increasingly our projects are integrated so that there may be a development component mixed with a peacebuilding component. And I would say most frequently these have involved water, they've involved microfinance, they've involved agriculture, they've involved education. So that's the first set of bullets, if you will, kind of the scope of what it is that we're talking about when we talk about our justice and peacebuilding work in CRS. Next, a couple examples of this. I hope you had a chance. I serve in a lot of bodies where you get reading material in advance, and I know we don't always get to them. But I hope you had a chance. I won't have time to really describe much about the case study in Arroya in Peru. But if you did have a chance to look, Arroya is one of the most polluted places in the entire world. The smelting operation that has gone on there for decades has done some very negative things to the environment and to human health in that area. And the study that you have there that demonstrates the work of international NGOs, of churches, including the Presbyterian Church and the Archbishop of Huancayo, which is the diocesan seat for that area, Archbishop Barreto, is a good example of many of the things that we try to do. And I think I could mention some of those. First of all, the whole area of extractives and conflicts around mining, oil, gas is a booming area, not in the good sense, of work. There are so many conflicts occurring in communities around these kinds of issues today. In Latin America, in Africa, and other parts of the world. Next, it demonstrates work with the church and other actors in civil society. It's also a demonstration of work at different levels. There's a great deal of work going on with MOSAO, with the Mesa de Diálogo, the dialogue tables, or circles, I guess we would call them. Locally, the Montaro Valley Lives Again initiative and so on. And yet there's also international work that's going on with the corporate headquarters in St. Louis, Missouri. And there is work going on that involves at least one research contribution by a university, St. Louis University's work on the level of lead in children's blood in that area, something very negative for their individual development. Our work is particularly in support of the local population there in Peru, but it has been very strong with a very courageous Catholic Church partner. I had the privilege of being with Bishop Barreto in Huancayo a number of years ago, and he was recently in Washington with some of our colleagues here, continuing to work for a just solution to this situation. The other example I want to mention is the Sudans. Sudan has been a priority for our peace and justice work here. CRS itself raised somewhere in between $3 and $4 million to work in the lead up to the January 2011 referendum and working for a peaceful referendum process. The people of the South in that referendum voted 99% or so in favor of independence for the South from the northern part of the country. CRS worked in the lead up to that referendum with radio programs, providing information about how to register to vote, encouraging people not to be provoked into violence in that period of time. They worked on an early warning, early response system where there were potential hot points. They worked to strengthen the justice and peace commissions of the local church. They worked on a project of prayer that brought in many of the Muslims in the country as well. It was called 101 Days of Prayer for Peace that led up to the referendum and was a very successful project as well. So here we worked with many church partners and in two different instances brought delegations of church leaders, both Protestant and Catholic, from the Sudan to the United Nations and to Washington to address people in Congress and even the White House. We have it indirectly, anecdotally, from someone in the National Security Council that visit was very influential in terms of the White House saying, okay, this referendum needs to go forward on time, otherwise we're going to have very serious difficulties. The difficulties continue, of course, but we feel like we did make a significant contribution to a peaceful referendum process, and we continue to work in that area today. I could answer questions later. I just came back Saturday night, in fact, from a 2-week visit to Khartoum and to West Darfur. And out there in the north you don't find Catholic Church partners that you can work with. You don't find religious partners, for the most part, that you can work with. But there are local civil society organizations, community-based organizations that we are working with in a place like Darfur. I did a workshop last Tuesday with 8 of those community-based organizations looking at how they could help in their communities to go through participatory processes of analyzing the local conflicts that usually occur along ethnic divides or between herders with their animals and the settled farmers around land and water and things of that kind, how they could analyze and respond to those kinds of conflicts. And we also talk quite a bit about being conflict sensitive when we work on development projects. So in the north, we have worked with a number of civil society partners and in a very, very restricted space. I was in a meeting about a month ago with the Life and Peace Institute Board of Directors, and we were talking about the next conclave of life and peace, perhaps focusing on small spaces and how you work in small spaces and what kind of words you can use and not use. And we could talk about that a little bit. But peace is a dirty word in Sudan these days. Marginalized is a dirty word. You're supposed to say vulnerable. Connectors is a dirty word, and so on and so on and so on. So it gives you some indication, I think, of the space and the restrictions of a regime in which you're trying to work for some local peace, and yet it's tough going. In all of these cases, I think to work for peace and to work for justice involves persistence. It involves being able to take the blows when things don't go so well. And it involves serious planning, but also flexibility. Perhaps in some cases scenario work. You know, if this is the way it goes, then maybe we'll do this. And if it goes this way, maybe we'll do that. Because you can't count on a stable environment in which to carry out your work. Finally, how am I doing on time?
You are doing fine.
Okay.
You have about 5 more minutes.
All right, good. I want to mention some of the ways in which universities have been working with us in the area of justice and peace building, and some arena in which I think we can potentially work together. CRS has been fortunate to have what is called a learning alliance with the Kroc Institute for International Peace Studies at the University of Notre Dame. And we've done a number of things with them. We have held what used to be called Summer Institutes of Peace Building. They're still called Summer Institutes of Peace Building, except they're in nobody's summer anymore. And they're no longer on the campus of Notre Dame. We tend to do them in other parts of the world, most recently in Cairo and then actually in San Diego, since we couldn't get visas for El Salvador. But we've been doing these, and we've had support of their faculty in these institutes on peace building. We have a fellowship program. Each year they provide an apartment and a stipend on campus for one of our staff or partners to come and focus, reflect, read, and write about their peace-building work. We have at least one joint publication with them, which is called Reflective Peacebuilding, which is in its third printing, or is out of its third printing at this point in time. We also had some advocacy work there through a program called Play for Peace, which was about Sudan and involved students on campus engaging in sports activities and building up their own awareness of and advocacy around a peaceful referendum in Sudan. The Catholic Peacebuilding Network is centered in terms of office space at the Kroc Institute at Notre Dame. And through it, there's also a relationship between a number of the universities that are part of the Catholic Peacebuilding Network and African universities, which want to develop programs in things like Catholic social teaching and peacebuilding studies. We've had some research support. St. Louis University's example in Peru is one. We also currently have a study in the eastern part of Democratic Republic of Congo looking at how women who've been victimized in the violence there can be reincorporated into their communities and have some sort of livelihood. And we're looking at which kinds of livelihood mechanisms seem to be most effective in bringing them back in. So it's kind of a compare and contrast. It's not exactly randomized control, but it's experimental design. We also have university working with us in Lebanon in terms of what seems to determine whether a local community is able to resist political manipulation to become violent or not. We have some examples there of communities that have gone into violence and not gone into violence. We've done trainings of various kinds. With the dean of the University of San Diego, I did 3 workshops in Burma, Myanmar a couple years ago with the church on peace building and on Catholic social teaching. Recently, a professor from Boston College was in Sudan to meet with the parliament and also with church leaders to talk about good governance and about constitution making in South Sudan. And we've had some help with proposal development. Georgetown University's master's program in conflict resolution was helpful in one particular case with looking at a conflict analysis and a concept note for proposal development in India. They took it into their graduate class, and so the class's assignment was to review this piece of work and send their feedback. So they joined me in feeding back to our program in India about the strengths and weaknesses of that proposal. So examples of ways in which we've had university collaboration. I think an area in which we always need work is good conflict analysis. I think that's an area, whether you're going to do a development project in a hot conflict zone and just want to be sensitive and do no harm, or if you really want to work on the conflict, you need to begin with a good analysis. Evaluation and learning is increasingly important, demonstrating that we're actually getting somewhere, that we're getting some results. It's another arena in which I think university support could be helpful. Advocacy of different kinds also. And finally, I just want to recognize the difficulty. I had a very short stint as a university professor. One entire year after I finished my PhD. But I know how difficult it can be sometimes to line up the research interests and agendas and career paths of faculty with the kind of stuff that CRS is doing. And so looking for those overlaps where we can, in fact, be helpful to one another, I think will be a particular challenge, and I'm sure you'll take it up tomorrow in your discussion. So a few bullets, and thank you.